delay for further questions. Turning now to Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madame McClymont, did I hear you say in answer to a question by MP Bradford that you would characterize the appointment process with respect to the chair and board of SDTC to be a success?
Mr. Chair, I would note that I think what I was mentioning was the fact that there was a consultation done in advance of the appointment to emphasize, as was pointed out in the Ethics Commissioner's report, and I guess what I would say on that is that to me is a best practice. That if somebody does have a conflict, that they go to a potential conflict, that they meet with the Ethics Commissioner in advance.
Madam McClymont. It was conflict upon conflict upon conflict, because it wasn't just Ms. Verscheren who had a conflict. One Stephen Kikucha, a Liberal insider at Trudeau Organizer, had received $20 million in funding from SDTC, and yet he was appointed to the board. Guillaume, months before his appointment, had received millions of dollars in funding from SDTC. There seems to be a pattern here. And that pattern, under this government's watch, is in order to be appointed to SDTC, one must have a conflict of interest. How else are these people being appointed with the disastrous result of $330 million taxpayer dollars that improperly went out the door, funneled into the companies of these very same insiders who had conflicts of interest right out of the gate, and yet they got through the process. Hardly a success.
I'm not quite sure what the question is, Mr. Chair.
I think I would simply say if you aren't prepared to call that a failure, then I don't know what could be a failure, because it's a top to bottom failure, a systematic failure. But ultimately, it was the minister who made the decision. So going back to the letter of recommendation from PCO, once that letter with recommended candidates, in this case for the chair of SDTC, and you're going to come back with the number on that letter, it is up to the minister and the minister's team to then vet those recommended candidates. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. We provide advice to the minister, and it would be for the minister to assess the candidates based on our advice and make a recommendation to the Governor and Council, which would then be approved by Cabinet.
That's right. And so so PCO is not involved. Once the letter is sent, it's the minister who vets, and then the minister ultimately makes a recommendation to the Cabinet, and that individual is then appointed.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. The minister would make a recommendation. For further clarity, he would send in a ministerial recommendation, or she, to the Governor and Council. And once we do a security and background check clearance, then the individual in question would be brought forward for Cabinet consideration.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, because you have now put on the record something Minister Baines repeatedly refused to acknowledge when he appeared before the Industry Committee back in June, and that is that the buck stopped with him. The ultimate decision lied with him to appoint Annette Verscheren. It wasn't some process and with the PCO being responsible. It was the minister, correct?
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, I would say that we would have provided advice to the minister, and the minister, based on the advice provided by the Privy Council office following a selection process, would have made a recommendation to the Governor and Council.
Would PCO undertake due diligence reviews of each of the candidates with the view of identifying conflicts of interest?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, as part of the selection process, we absolutely have, in the notice of opportunity, right up through all phases of the appointment process, selection process and appointment process. We do ask individuals at many opportunities if they have any conflicts, and if things are identified to us,
Yeah,
we recommend
so
they
what
speak
we know,
to
we know,
the
we know the
commissioner.
end result for you, Mr. Chair. The minister just ignored issues of conflicts of interest, because how else would Ms. Verscheren be appointed? How else would Stephen Kukucha be appointed? How else would Mr. Umat be appointed? The minister simply didn't care. It came down to handing out appointments to Liberal insiders. Conflicts be damned. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The floor is yours if you have a response, but I did not hear a question there, but I will allow a response, Ms. Clement.
I appreciate that. I would say that, as I've said several times now, I think that inherent in having a piece of legislation that provides for both MPs and governor and council appointees to declare conflict of interests, it is understood that there will be cases where that will happen, and the issue is the importance of having a robust system in place to manage those conflicts.
Thank you.
System clearly
Mr.
was not
Cooper, that is
robust.
your time, I'm afraid. Turning now to Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. It isn't PCO's role, but the Ethics Commissioner's office to provide appointees with clarity on the rules under the Act. Do you believe the Ethics Commissioner could also strengthen its processes to ensure issues like this do not arise in the future?
Mr. Chair, as I've mentioned, I have had conversations with the commissioner. I'm not sure if he's coming to appear before the committee, but I would say absolutely. Is there more opportunities for awareness? This is something that certainly in processes of continuous improvement could be looked at. It would really be up to him, obviously, to decide. As I said, I actually find, as a governor and council appointee myself, they send out regular circulars to us. They send out reports. The Verscheren report would have been sent to all governor and council appointees as an information piece, which I myself read with great interest long before I was asked to appear before this committee. So I think they do a lot, and I think it's the onus is on the individual to make sure they understand their obligations. Is there more we could do? For sure. In many cases, there's more we could do. I wouldn't want to put the commissioner on the spot in terms of the resources that he has available, but it is certainly something I will continue to talk to him about if there's more that we can do to make sure people are aware.
Pardon me, you mentioned that PCO is making 2 appointments to the NRC board. How does your office assess these candidates?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, I noticed on our website there's 2 vacancies, so we would normally run a process. Like I have said from the outset, we would post a notice of opportunity on our website, and we would invite people to apply, and we would assess those applications. So sometimes, depending on the requirements under the legislation, we don't fill all the positions available. It does become a question of efficiencies and costs at some points in time. So there is quite, I would say, a comprehensive board for the NRC right now, but it's certainly something we could talk to our colleagues about if they're looking to fill members with the chair.
What is PCO doing to attract people to difficult sectors?
Mr. Chair, this is a huge challenge. I won't. I'll be honest with the committee, and I hope that if people are listening today and they are interested in serving serving the country, that they will put their applications forward. It is tricky. We have outreach. We have outreach initiatives, I guess, that I would say, that we work with departments, generally speaking, who are the experts, who work with the organizations. Sometimes outreach headhunting firms are hired. We do try to be judicious about that because it can be costly, and I myself am quite careful in terms of making sure that we hire firms that are going to actually be able to help us find candidates that are qualified, and not just to go to the usual suspects, to be honest, to try to find people from across the country who may not have put their hand up before to serve, so that we're really trying to attract diverse candidates from all pockets across Canada. So it is a challenge. I won't hesitate to say that. We do have tens of thousands of people that have applied for different processes. Some get more interest than others, but certainly, you know, if I hope one good thing comes out of today, that we do get more people interested to apply to serve their country, because I do think it can be hugely challenging, and it's hugely frustrating, and it causes delays. Like sometimes it will take us up to a year to run a process because we just can't find people that fit the criteria to serve.
Do you feel that the conflict of interest rules might be too tight given your challenges that you mentioned just now, and also when you had given an example of someone from the nuclear energy sector apply or being considered, and it was difficult to find anyone who did not have shares in the tech field?
Mr. Chair, I think I would say that I think that we have a robust system in place. It's very strong legislation, and you yourselves, as member of Parliament, who have to adhere to the legislation as well. I think it's quite strong, and I think it's quite important in a democratic society that we have strong legislative tools to protect against conflict. But I would admit it is a challenge. Sometimes it's really tough to find people who are willing to serve, who have the requisite skill set and knowledge that align with the legislation in question.
Thank you.